So much media, so little time. Who keeps track of it all? That would be me. This is Bob Andelman, and this is the Mr. Media Interview, recorded live on blogtalkradio.com on June 27th, 2008. That's great! Yeah, well, good for you, Stipe. You know, lots of people sing and talk about the impending end of days, but how many actually tell you how to prepare for what may come after the end? Oh, really? That many? All right, let's put it this way. How many make you laugh in the telling? Okay, I got you there, right? In his new book, Apocalypse How, Rob Kuttner dishes out handy tips on everything from foraging for food to fooling around with mutants in a post-now world. I'm not quite sure yet how Kuttner comes by his encyclopedic post-apocalyptic knowledge, but the humor he comes by honestly. He's a 4-time Emmy Award-winning staff writer for Comedy Central's The Daily Show with Jon Stewart and a contributor to Stewart's book, America, the Book. Rob, welcome to Mr. Media.
Great to be here.
Delighted to have you. Let's just jump right in. It's the last day pre-apocalypse. What's on your list of things to do today?
Oh, boy. You have to make it, you have to decide if you're going to stay or go, and then you have to make a to-hoard list. It's very important. I would have, of course, multiple copies of the book because it's entirely fireproof and radioactivity proof. You know, if that's not a selling point enough. If ideally you want to put copies of it all over your entire body. Yeah, I'm just saying that, just saying to be prepared. I think the most important thing you want to do, though, is no matter which apocalyptic scenario happens, and in my book I outline the 9 most likely ones, you're probably going to have to be running from something. So I think a good idea is to start stretching now. You know, working those hamstrings, maybe the glutes a little bit. You don't want to be doing a warm-up period, you know, when the earth is already heavily warmed up.
Okay, so you got me there because you really have thought this out. That's good.
But don't tell my publisher that because they thought it all came out of my rear region, which some of it did.
Well, what do you think that you can skip doing on your last day pre-disaster, PD?
Well, that's a good thing. That's one of the good things I think about the whole enterprise, not just before but during and after. There's a lot of stuff could fall by the wayside. You probably don't have to update your Facebook profile for one thing. It could just be like, is on the run. You probably don't have to keep up with that. You don't have to write any thank you notes, outstanding things for gifts or parties or anything like that. And you can probably clear most of the appointments in your PDA of choice.
How do you deal with debt? Do you just you let the debt go? You don't have to worry about the debt anymore?
Yeah, and I think actually, I have a chapter on shelter called Relocation, where I encourage people to build their dream refuge now. And to, despite all the mortgage crisis talk we've heard, if the apocalypse is coming, that's really the best time to get a really heavy interest rate mortgage, 7-year or 30 years, because who knows where the banks are going to be standing in 7 years. So get that 45% interest rate and get the house you want.
Now you mentioned a minute ago about you're probably going to have to be on the run that day. What do you suppose might be chasing us? Are we talking Planet of the Apes simians? Are we talking WALL-E? Are we talking robots? What do you think?
Yes, WALL-E's going to kill us with adorability, I think, and throw merchandise at us. I have a chapter on fitness in which I outline actually a couple of very specific running scenarios, including the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse. Always a good candidate. It could be apes and simian takeover as discussed. It could be robots. It could be cybernetically enhanced robotic bees unleashed by a mad supervillain. Any number of those scenarios are possible. So, and the likelihood is that they're going to probably come after one of your very delectable listeners first, I think.
Those of you who are watching have the video in the web chat. I'm pointing at you, okay? I want them coming for you. I just want to stay here in my little hut.
Yeah, don't marinate yourself if you can help it.
Okay. What was the inspiration for writing the book? I mean, were you were you cleaning up outdated supplies in your basement bomb shelter or rereading Nostradamus? What was going on with you at the time?
What does outdated really mean? I mean, then you can just say that I prefer to think of them as retro, But well, a couple of things. I was a Jewish kid who went to a Christian school from kindergarten through 12th grade, and they sort of introduced the idea of hell pretty early on, So I was already thinking about the next stage, I think. I used to say that in my senior year, the student newspaper would publish a list of where all the graduating seniors were going, and next to my name they put Lake of Fire, which I thought was a little on the nose. But it was just my safety school anyway, so I mean that's doubly inaccurate. So I had that idea, sort of a morbid maybe fascination from an early age. I also, during the 80s, when we had the Cold War still very prevalent, all those miniseries like The Day After, if you remember that. That just freaked me out for days and days and days, and not just because it involved Steve Gutenberg in a bald cap, but I mean that stuff like I think haunted me, and then it sort of went, like most things, you squeeze it into a ball and you put it in the back of your head, and then I think after 9/11 and with the bird flu and the sort of rise of Al Gore and environmental catastrophe, all those things sort of like raised the idea in my head again that like there's any number of ways that it could all go boom. Also, I'm a big fan of 24. So honestly, like if Jack Bauer just stopped like to take a dump at one point, it's so tenuous that all those doomsday scenarios that he stops could easily be derailed at any point.
I'm stuck on Jack Bauer stopping to take a dump.
Or let's say if he was put in jail for something for some reason, if that were to happen,
Right. Wow.
Yeah. They don't show you every part of the show, but I can't even go like 4 hours, I think, without hitting the John. So I don't know how he did.
That's a Jewish thing, I think.
It might be.
Yeah. So I mean, well, as serious as we can be. So a Jewish kid goes to Catholic school for 12 years. I would think that would be a little confusing to your perception of life and life after life.
Well, I think to some extent. I mean, first of all, I should say I was Presbyterian, which is totally different.
Oh.
We didn't have to you don't do communion, for example, at Catholic schools, which is good because I was a vegetarian. So that was a little bit more comforting than it could have been. And you didn't have to wear the uniforms, which was, I think, unfortunate because the schoolgirl uniform syndrome. I don't have to get. I missed out on that entirely. And I think that at my school the main thing was that if you're not of the predominant religion, you just sort of feel you just feel a little different, and you realize that from an early age. Like for example, we had a play in the 5th grade where we did the life and death of Jesus, and they cast me as a merchant. So that's an early identity crisis, I think, or of some sort, or a clarification, depending on how you look at it.
Oh man, I want to share, with your permission, something from the book. This is from page 10, Armageddon, The Bright Sides.
Right.
You say, sure, a world-ending war, natural disaster, unforeseen cosmic event will mean incalculable destruction, the deaths of millions, if not billions, and the possible poisoning of the earth for generations. But if you are one of the lucky few to crawl out of the rubble, you have two options. Option A, get mired in negativity. Oh, boo-hoo, I can't find my family or my left arm. Golly gee willikers, my life would be so much easier if we only had electricity, the rule of law, or potable water. Or B, and there's a little more to it, or B, choose to live by the simple but powerful credo. When life gives you radioactive lemons, use a lead-shielded catapult to launch them at the foragers attacking your compound. Just to give people a little taste of what's in the book. I wondered if we could go through your topics. I want to say that there are 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, basically 8 chapters, I think, that you deal with. By
the way, that was a very good reading. If I do the book on tape version, you're definitely on the short list.
Excellent. Hey, I got one job to look forward to in the post-apocalyptic world.
You got that to fall back on.
Who knows if Blog Talk Radio will be working at the time, but I got that to look forward to.
But I'm so excited about the apocalypse. I'm sort of hoping it happens before we get to the book on tape stage.
Oh well, yeah, but that's true because the books on tape won't do us any good if there's no power.
That's right, exactly. You have to have someone like turning it with a pencil and putting a fingernail on it or something.
Or the hamster electrical system.
I actually hope it happens if it happens right after Christmas, so that you have the maximum gift buying season.
And gift receiving.
Right, so of course.
Yeah.
Well, I would say it's better to buy than receive.
Well, of course. Of course. That's because you want to receive more and you want to say the right thing.
Exactly.
Do you mind if we go through the book section by section, and maybe you could give us an example of maybe some of your favorite advice or guidance?
Yeah, of course.
Topic by topic. Let's start with the first. I think it's food and supplies. What do we need to know about food and supplies in the post-apocalyptic world?
All right. Well, food supplies is, obviously we're going to have to be more creative about our approach to what we deem edible or delicious. So I have a number of ways to do that. One of them is I have a series of recipes called the Diet After, and that includes delicacies like tumbleweed surprise and mushu varmint and Steve tartare. And I just want to say, one of the things I try to encourage people about is to rethink, our ideas about cannibalism. I find cannibalism extremely flattering. And honestly, who's always been against cannibalism? It's been people. So, that's you want to talk about conflict of interest. And I think also it's the good thing that people don't know this is that other people don't have a lot of trans fat. So I think that's kind of encouraging. I think if you've been watching your weight right now, if you don't have as much food, all the temptations we have now that people always say that they're going to lose weight after New Year's, we can keep those resolutions now, I think. So that's in the food chapter. I also have, as I was saying before, I have a two hoard list sponsored by Costco, which has quite a few details, but you need some basics, basically like cutting implements, repairing implements, cutting anyone who tries to take your cutting or repairing implements. So I basically have a pretty thorough list. And go ahead.
Well, should we clarify? And because of sometimes the sound quality doing this, that was the 2TO hoard list, HOARDE, yes. Not the two whores list. I think that comes later in the book.
Yes, that's right. Yes, okay. You have to wait for the whores, I think.
Right,
I want to reward the reader, I think, for that much.
Well, I think the whores always find you, don't they?
They do, I think.
Yeah, okay. All right, so go ahead.
The good thing is that you can, they'll be more amenable to bartering, I think, which is good.
I can only hope.
Right.
Was there something else on food and supplies you wanted to mention, or shall we move on?
Let's move on.
All right.
I think it's a good philosophy to think about the apocalypse, and that you got to keep moving.
Well, exactly. And then when that fits into the second section, which is
right.
The realtor's dream: relocation.
Right. So in this chapter, again, I view the apocalypse as an opportunity to change things up a little bit. I have some recommendations on the top apocalyptic hotspots brought to you by Hasty Travel and Leisure magazine, including Antarctica, next to the Great Wall of China, where I think you'd be very safe, at least if you're on the right side of it. Top of K2, Atlantis. We also, for the kids, we also enjoy they may not always enjoy the trip. If you were taking your kids on a road trip, it's bad enough when conditions are safe, but after the apocalypse, so I include some what I call remains of the road trip games, which are basically like variations on I Spy and license plates and former state capitals, things like that. Also, some newly created roadside attractions you're going to want to look out for, like world's biggest ball of plutonium, Mount Rush even more, which is Mount Rushmore with mutated heads. That's all to look forward to. And then the other thing that I look at in that chapter is once you've resettled, or at least temporarily resettled, is you're going to really want to make, your place of refuge a home. So I have a lot of home decorating tips, an very extreme makeover, I think you could call it. For either your cave or your fallout shelter or your bunker, where I go into color schemes, furniture, and basically like how you want to lay out your final dream house.
Rob, are you old enough to have read the National Lampoon? What is it when it was in its heyday, or have you seen it? You know.
Well, I mean, I was probably a little young when it was sort of in its heyday, but working in a comedy show, that stuff gets passed around, and it's definitely immortal. So I don't know what you're alluding to, but I've seen some of the movies.
Yeah, the reason I ask is that the thing I like about the book, which I'm holding up for the video again, the thing I really liked is that you take a concept and play it out in a way that the Lampoon in its best days would do something like that. They might do the magazine parody like you did with Travel and Leisure, or they might do other aspects of it. And then sometimes they do a whole issue that'd be devoted to a subject, but they could never carry it off for a whole issue. That was always the thing. It's kind of like Saturday Night Live. You watch the first 30 minutes, and then after Weekend Update, they're pretty much exhausted.
And the first 30 minutes is just one sketch, actually. So.
Well, yeah, okay. But I mean, you actually carry off the concept for the entire length of the book.
Well, thank you. That's very flattering. I like to think of this as sort of a National Lampoon work without breasts. Which may or may not be a selling point for you, but.
Yeah, that would be a complaint. I was really hoping to see some breasts in here, but I'll just go back to the internet when we're done with our conversation.
There you go. Well, listen, if you've got man breasts, then I think everything you need is at hand.
Oh, I hope not. Let's take a shot at clothing. What do we need to know about clothing?
Well, the great thing about clothing is I like to think of whatever happens to our civilization, the remains of it will be sort of the ultimate secondhand store. And one particular example of that is you may be familiar with the Rapture, which I actually did not learn about in high school, but subsequently. The Rapture is a belief held by a few sects of Christianity, not all of them, that the way that the end times will play out is that Jesus will come back and he will lift up all the bodies of the believers, which I guess are the members of the certain sects of Christianity, and their bodies will be brought up to heaven so they can sort of watch the final kind of pay-per-view boxing match between Jesus and the Antichrist. It's kind of the ultimate skybox, honestly. But for the rest of us, the sinners, as I said, they're going to be brought up just their bodies. That means their clothes are going to be left behind, and that's actually true in the lore of the Rapture, is that you're brought up naked and your clothes are left behind. And so that is an amazing shopping opportunity, I think, for the rest of us. So I have a whole a shopping guide throughout the United States of which regions specialize in which kind of clothes. And that's something to really look forward to. I also offer some tips on maintaining your clothes, what the new fashion trends are going to be in the end times, and so maybe some new cutting-edge fashions I call the Nuclear Winter Collection, which is really like making use, I think, of the materials at hand, and I think rethinking our concept of it's basically either nakedness or whatever materials are left in scraps. So I say work it.
Sounds good. I think I want to point out that some listeners may think that we're giving away the whole book, that what we're talking about here, there's no reason to buy the book. But I have to say, we're barely skimming the surface. We're going to touch a few more topics, but
I keep it superficial whenever I can.
There you go.
and the other thing I should say, just to plug this a little bit, is that there's an amazing designer who laid out this book. Named Josh McDonnell, and you've seen the book, so you know. But like every page is like almost a work of art. Like every page has some new fun visual thing or some completely different design thing. And it's just a really I can take no credit for this at all. It's just a beautiful book to look at. So and if you go to if you go to apocalypsehowthebook.com, which is the website, you can see a few excerpts of that, and you just get a little taste of just all the color and all the visuals are really just a lot of fun.
Well, and yeah, so that's what I mean. I don't want people to hear us talking about it and think they don't need the book. They need the book, but there's just so much in here. I mean, just the footnotes alone, we could fill an hour with.
Right, well, if I didn't keep it scholarly, I don't think I would have any credibility.
Well, it's cool. Yeah, I mean, the other magazine, I guess that it reminded me a bit of was Spy, because of the footnotes and the fact that the way it's laid out a little bit.
I like that you've identified two, National Lampoon and Spy, two defunct organizations now. So I don't know if that's a good omen or not.
Well, they had good long runs, though.
That's true. They had their hits.
They had good long runs, and I can say that I started with and outlived them both. So
right.
I don't think there's a problem there.
Advantage Bob.
Advantage Bob. Thank you very much. You made some reference to religion, and we're coming up on social life. I'm wondering, did you have to bone up on religions of the world to write this book in some ways to get all the apocalyptic visions and theories?
Well, there's this great thing called Wikipedia. That, as I understand it, it comes directly from God, onto your web browser, and therefore is flawless. No, I mean, I think I did a little. I've always had an interest in religions anyway. I think part of it probably came out of being, the minority religion and the majority religion school. So I always was sort of very aware of it and interested in, alternate faiths and religious pluralism. So I've always had kind of an interest anyway. I did sort of do a little bit of research into, because it's really fascinating, like the wide range of scenarios that different faiths envision the end of the world. A lot of people are talking now, because it's coming up about 2012. I don't know if you've seen this, but that's when the Mayans, had this famously sophisticated calendar, very way before the Western world had calendars that were as advanced. They predicted that there would be a huge change in 2012. Now, you do have to wonder why they were so good at predicting other civilizations' demises, and let's say not their own, but a lot of people are sort of taking that seriously now. So 2012, I think, is a nice long window for book sales. So I'm in favor of that. And then, of course, you've got, it really blows your mind a little bit. I really only tweet about it on about 2 pages of the book, which is, even I think, is pretty superficial, but just kind of a little capsule description of all the different religions is interesting. Even within Christianity, for example, you've got Mormonism believes that Jesus is going to come back to Missouri, which I'm thinking dream big here, people. Really? St. Louis? That's the best you can...
That's pretty specific.
Yeah, is he coming back for the custard? I don't know what the... and that's even far from Utah, for that. I guess it maybe was while they were fleeing from state to state, they picked one, and then the religion had to be moved, so they didn't have time to update it or something. But it is really fascinating. This is how wildly just imaginative and just divergent other cultures believe that the world will sort of be brought low and then maybe reborn in certain cases.
Well, as we move on to fitness and health, let me give out our phone number if anyone would like to call in and ask Rob Kuttner, the author of Apocalypse How and a writer for The Daily Show with Jon Stewart, a question. If you're listening to us live on Friday, what's today? June 27th, 646-595-3135. Love to have your calls. So that brings us to fitness and health.
Yes.
I guess if you're going to be running all the time and on the move all the time, your health is probably going to be better than it is in the pre.
Absolutely. I think, one of the big things is that we make all kinds of excuses. We're going to go jogging tomorrow, or we'll go to the gym, Thursday or something like that. You don't really have a choice, possibly, after the apocalypse. So, it's not really up to your willpower anymore, which I think is a great thing. In fact, beyond running, also, I come up with some other exercises that you may get to engage in, zombie checks. If you're in a underground shelter hiding out from zombies, you're going to want to be doing those pull-ups to lift yourself up and check to see if there's zombies. That kind of stuff is really going to...
Only until dawn, right?
Only until dawn, yeah. But that stuff is really going to give your biceps a good workout. And I think in general, there is something to the idea that we've become pretty soft and we're used to having things done for us. So a do-it-yourself culture is one in which you get the full body workout all the time.
Now, there's actually 2 sections of the book for recreation. The first, I actually want to contribute something here.
Okay.
This is from your book, but it was a favorite of mine. It was from recreation. The first section is sex, drugs, and rocks. You actually have the top 25 from Boom Board, not Billboard, Boom Board, and I wanted to share a couple of these titles, give you a chance to catch your breath, and I'll...
Some of the best songs you're going to enjoy after the apocalypse.
Absolutely. Increasingly Wild World, When a Man Claims a Woman, The Roof is Literally on Fire, What a Cinderful World, We Got to Get Out of This Place. Okay, now this one. Baby Got Hunchback, Brick Hut, Girls Just Want to Have Food. I like that. I like that list. I won't read them all, but that was pretty good. There's some good stuff in there.
That's one of my favorite sections, too, just because that was just like, a lot of times when you write a book, you have to sort of think through all the arguments in the sections, and that was literally just taking, like, my favorite songs and just, like, tweaking them. that's like candy corn, for the comedy writer.
Absolutely. And anybody who has any knowledge of music will get that. And anyone who doesn't have a knowledge of pop music will just won't. But it's actually
screw them.
On the very... Yeah, screw them, damn it. Well, speaking of... Now that you mentioned screw them...
Oh, wow. Nicely done, Bob.
The very next page, and every section has a Before We Blow, there's a section on love, and it says, or you've written, I should say, just because you're going to spend your after days and nights hooking up like a masochistic bait worm is no reason not to plan your conquests well in advance of the end. It will give your fumbling, anonymous trysts that much more of a thoughtful quality. Specifically, run through that old mental game, marry, screw, or kill, as in which would I rather do to, with, atop this person, with every one of the genders you prefer, but simply expand the list to also include soon-to-be more relevant categories. Kidnap, buy, worship, barter away, use as human sandbag during flood. It's a fun book. Fun book, Rob.
Thanks. And the thing, what I also like in that chapter to tag back a little bit is I have a whole section that I particularly enjoyed writing that's on marriage and wedding rituals after the apocalypse, which I call Planning for the Big Day. Well, the other one, anyway. And that one, I offer everything from like new relevant ways to pop the question, to choosing a venue, to registering, to just classic wedding advice like don't sweat the small stuff, which I think will be particularly relevant, and also of course honeymoon locations. So I think there's really something for everyone at every stage of life. And you know what? If you don't like your current marriage, the apocalypse is a reset button. So. and if you're in a relationship with someone, it's so hard to break up with people.
Yeah.
It's much easier to say, it's not you, it's the mushroom cloud. That's just an easy breakup line, and then no one takes it personally.
So we have that to look forward to also.
On the other hand, the flip side of that is you might be more likely to run into a lot more X's, if the human population has been drastically reduced. So, you got to take your chances.
Yeah.
I bummed you out. Yes.
Yeah, you did actually. It's like they say, right before you die, your life flashes before your face. Well, when you said that, I'm thinking of all those faces, and I'm thinking, that could be a drawback to all this good apocalyptic fun.
Think about all the faces that you don't like.
I know. That's what was coming to mind.
Right.
Oh, but you mean because maybe they'll be gone.
I'm going to get off this topic entirely, I think, because the last thing I want to make is Bob cry.
Yeah, that would be a bad thing. All right.
The book is very absorbent, so if you have any tears, this is your opportunity to dab them away.
For webcast viewers, I'm dabbing my eyes with that right now. That worked. All right. The second part of recreation is filling up the day after. Now, I have to tell you, this is the one thing I didn't quite get the subtitle here. Can you explain it a little bit?
Oh, it just means like things that you would do to pass the time, as it were. Filling up the day. Once again, I'm too clever for my audience. Or let's say that I was in a hurry and just added some subtitles in as an afterthought. Let's say that might have happened too.
I've done that on a few of my books. It
does happen.
Okay. Yeah. So what is the main theme we should take from this? We deal with sports and is there a highlight in this chapter you want to share?
This is this is as you were suggesting, this is kind of the lighter stuff of like new variations on sports. I have a very comprehensive chart on how 9 different sports will change under every scenario. I have a board game which you can actually play, which is a 2-page spread called Armageddonopoly, which is basically an apocalyptic version of Monopoly. And also some variations in classic card games, how sports mascots will change, and I think the sort of probably as well as some tips on like entertaining, guests, having parties, and what the etiquette is for that. And I think probably one of my favorite things in that is early in the chapter. I just call it 10 things to do before the rest of humanity dies. But this is just all those things you've been meaning to get around to doing, which will just be much easier now. Learn a foreign language. People are not going to quibble over your grammar, whether you use tu or vous correctly when vous are the one sitting on the petrol reserve. It's much more welcoming language. You can finally have that organic garden. You really won't have a choice. Take a class, volunteer, finally write that novel. So just this is a chance to no more excuses. Live the life you want to live if you manage to be lucky enough to live.
Now, the last chapter of the main part of the book is career, wealth, and power, and you started off this way: strange as it may sound, Strange as it may sound,
you're fired.
I am. I know. My God, there will be those for whom the permanent weekend will eventually get old. The go-getters, the entrepreneurs, those whom we call Type A personalities, but in the soon-to-be-reduced human population, will simply be known as personalities. In fact, if you're reading this book in pre-apocalyptic times, that shows you have foresight and plan ahead, so you just might be one of them. Man, do we hate people like you. But if the big day, or days, has already happened, and you found this in the rubble, stolen it, or bartered, murdered for it, congratulations. You just survived the largest downsizing in human history. I'm sorry I'm stealing your words, but it's...
No, you're honoring them, really. So that's basically the chapter is career, wealth, and power. So that leads right into a section on the best job market. It's basically the post-apocalyptic life will be the best job market ever. All kinds of vacancies, job stability, be your own boss. You may not have a choice in certain cases. Very easy interviews. You won't have people asking you anymore, yes, but how well do you know Excel? You'll never hear the phrase mandatory urine test again, I don't think. So I include an apocalyptic aptitude test. There's also the fastest growing catastrophic career sectors, new jobs you might want to consider. And then I also get into wealth and finance. I have investment tips, how you can make the most of your bartering and the assets that you do have. I have a lot of charts and graphs on that with completely made-up economic tips. And then finally I get into power or politics. Basically, as with all these other things, the apocalypse allows us we're always complaining about our political system. People are very attracted to Barack Obama talking about change we can believe in. Well, talk about a chance to change things up. I think this is definitely not politics as usual, I think. So I explore a couple of alternative political models that could come into place. Like instead of democracy, femocracy, ruled by women, or alphabetical order, if we just have the most powerful be those who are earliest in the alphabet. It's just easier to keep track in that way. And then finally we wind up with the seven habits of highly effective petty tyrants.
Just in case you get that opportunity too.
Right. So it's really, I think it's really a self-help or a self-non-harm book, if you want to look at it that way.
Now, has anybody objected to your making fun of the end of life as we know it?
No, that's the thing. It's actually been kind of a disappointment. I was really hoping that maybe one of the Christian groups or so on would catch wind of this, that, James Dobson would have a party and burn a bunch of these, because I think that would, I could really pull a Salman Rushdie move, I think, with that. Which I guess I don't mean going to hiding necessarily. Maybe I could be married to Lakshmi Pachmi. That would be nice too. But no, I think that I would welcome the controversy, and I've been a little disappointed that I haven't gotten hate mail. I actually had a cousin who offered to alert all the evangelical groups about this to put me on the radar, because I think boycott could really be a great PR move.
Oh yeah. Plus, I'd have to buy all the copies of the books in order to burn.
Yeah. For Tinder, right? You can't keep the fire going unless you keep buying paper, and it's in paperback, so it's already convenient.
Yeah, and royalties work the way royalties work. You get paid no matter what they buy the book to do with it.
That's right.
Yeah.
And that also reduces the chance that people are going to resell them used on Amazon or something like that, you know.
Now, any of your coworkers at the show think that you're a little more oddly obsessed than they are about their...
I think perhaps, I kind of did this sort of as a side project from the show, so I didn't really, I didn't necessarily, do it at work. I'm saying that in case my bosses are listening, by the way. I didn't do it at work, but so I kind of basically told everyone one day, hey, guess what? I've got this book coming out, and that sort of took everyone by surprise. And then I think when people saw what it was, they were like, you're even weirder than I thought.
Did they have any tip-offs that this was a major topic for you before the book came out?
No, I think I kept it pretty close to the vest. But I will say that in New York, where I live, there's this thing that the city recommends that you get called a go bag. This is basically like a bag full of supplies in case the worst does happen, like bottled water and cans of beans and a hand crank radio and some extra cash. And the city urges everyone to do this, but no one actually does it. But my wife and I, when we moved here, we actually did it. So we're kind of I think the word apocalypse nerds might be the term for it. So if anyone who knew that about us probably knew that we were thinking about this stuff a little bit more. We moved from L.A. where we had an earthquake kit as well. So every region has their wonderful bag.
Well, what would you call them? Apocalypse nerds?
Apoco nerds.
Apoco nerds. Sounds like a sequel opportunity to me.
It does actually. I'm going to do a whole chicken soup series, I think, Apocalypse How for the golfer, for the teenager, for the teenage golfer, something for everyone really. I'm going to tailor my message.
I think that's a good idea. I think you should go get started on that as soon as we're done, actually.
I've already started.
Oh, well, then you're not wasting any time, which is probably a smart move with what you're expecting. And listen, while it's still on the air, we should probably talk about your daily job, your day job at The Daily Show.
Right.
Can you, first of all, tell us a little bit about what you work on there? I don't know how I know there's a big writing staff. I don't know how things are split up, but can you explain a little bit about what you do there?
Just in the day-to-day breakdown?
Yeah.
Well, we have a staff of about 12 writers total, including the executives and the staff writers, which is pretty typical for a comedy show, especially a 4-day-a-week show. We all come in the morning. We have a morning meeting. We watch video packages of news. We subscribe to a wire service, and we just get the best news packages. We decide which ones have the best footage, which are the best stories, which are the most relevant, and which we have, we come up with some kind of comic angle on it. And then I think it's not different from a regular news outfit to some extent. We basically get assignments and deadlines. We have things edited. We have rewrites. And it's sort of an ongoing merry-go-round of assignments. I don't know from one day to the next, I don't know what I'm going to be doing necessarily. One day I might just be individually writing the headline, which is, if you've seen the show, it's just the opening section where it's John at the desk reporting on the top news.
Right.
It's been, or it might be what we call the chat, which is the sort of dialogues with the correspondents who are either in the field or, let's say, in front of a green screen, or at the desk, kind of exploring a topic in a little bit more depth with some kind of angle. Some days you'll be writing that with a partner, and then you'll go back and forth with John and get a couple of rewrite notes on that. Sometimes you'll be completely rewritten. It's part of the job. And then other days you'll work on thematic segments like the Lewis Black or the This Week in God, the sort of longer term, or John Hodgman, the longer term pieces that take a little bit more production and therefore a little bit more planning, are not quite as immediately topical. So those might be a few days. And then the other times we'll help the field department, which does those investigative pieces where the correspondents go out, usually to talk with some crazy person somewhere in America. We pitch those ideas. That we have a great field and research department that usually takes the lion's share of the work there and really bringing those to fruition. But we help out where we can. We help them come up with ideas to do when they go out to meet those people, and jokes and specific games. And then when they come back with the stuff they've shot, we help punch up the jokes that are in the final piece. And so we do a little bit of it all. And then when we're not doing that, there's often a lot of just what I call loose joke opportunities. We're just we have the story here, but we need a better joke this, or we need a title for this, or this and that. And so whoever's around, they gather together basically around someone's computer, and we all kind of shout out ideas, and we get a bunch of them, and then then the top brass picks their favorite.
So this is something I wondered about. So let's say Hodgman or Black or one of the other correspondents or one of the regular segments. It's not the same person necessarily affiliated or associated with that segment or that correspondent.
Well, no, they actually have their own their distinctive sections. Lewis Black, when he's not touring or doing something else, he's very busy. Has his Back in Black, which is just sort of like him raging about a couple of examples of some topic in the news. So stuff that, as they say, falls through the cracks on the show. It means we couldn't really do a full story on it, but it seemed worthy of mention and certainly worthy of ridicule. And likewise, John Hodgman is our resident expert, so he's the sort of pseudo-scientist of any topic he wants. So if we have some topic, usually a dry topic, like something in politics or something in science or economics that's like a little hard to attack, just behind the desk with John, because it's too much to explain, it's better to have John do it, because he has John Hodgman, he's a more narrative style, and he can go into arcana more easily. So we do have sort of like general topical areas, I would say.
Who's the best judge if something is funny? I mean, if you toss out jokes or story ideas or lines and stuff, who on that staff, do you know if they laugh, it's funny?
That's a dangerous question, Bob. I do have to work there, I honestly don't think it works that way. I mean, ultimately it's John's show, and whatever comes out of his mouth, a lot of it, or is associated with him. So, he's the kind of final arbiter naturally, and also he has excellent comic taste, and he sort of he didn't invent the show. He came to it as the second host, but he kind of brought a new style to it, which is definitely a voice of his. So, we're all sort of writing for his voice. So it ultimately comes down to John, and then, sort of his executive producers, filter that to some extent. But honestly, the way this works, and I think this is true of any comedy, is the sort of wisdom of crowds. I mean, if you get a bunch of people laughing at something, that's a good sign, because we're all coming at this stuff with different attitudes and backgrounds and comic sensibilities. But, if it reaches across a couple of people and they all laugh at it, that's usually a good indication. Whereas if it only gets one or two, votes, it may get a mixed reaction. So it's like we're doing a little mini focus group all the time.
Well, the nature of the show is, as any show of this kind would be, that we know that there's writers. You said there's a dozen writers, producers. You don't get credit outside of the show for a specific segment. So I'm wondering if in recent days or weeks, if there might be a segment or two you could point out that you worked on particularly that we could give you credit for here.
Well, I should note, first of all, that if you ask my mother, I've written every joke on the show. And I'm asked about each one individually. Literally, there was one time when there was a joke about apple juice, and my mother thought it was mine because as a child I enjoyed apple juice. So that's from an objective source. I think the thing that I worked on the most in depth recently, I mean, I've had jokes on the show, probably yesterday and the day before as well. 2 days ago, I had a joke that was about Obama talking about you can't take the Bible out of context, and there's parts of the Old Testament where it bans. It's called shellfish an abomination, and it says slavery is okay. And I said that was bad news for the proprietors of Bubba Gump Forced Labor Shrimp Company. If you saw that. But I think
did see that actually.
In terms of like a more in-depth thing, the thing I probably worked on most recently that I was excited about was we went to Hillary Clinton's non-concession speech. If you remember, a few days before she actually did concede, we sent Asif Manvi out to that big rally. I think it was on a Tuesday in New York, where everyone was like watching with bated breath. Is she going to concede tonight? What is she going to say? She's going to keep fighting. What's she going to say? It was very dramatic. And we didn't know what was going to happen. So sometimes they send a writer out in the field. So I went with a producer and I went with Asif and some crew. And we were just kind of like preparing for all different contingencies. We had to sort of have a multiple choice, choose your own adventure mentality. Like if she says this, we got to do this. And but while I was there, we were there for like 4 or 5 hours, and I was helping them come up with jokes and things for Asif to say and little bits that, and a lot of them ended up in the final piece. And it was kind of really nice that we had that immediacy, that we had a reporter, at that sort of historic moment, and we got to have our funny take on it, on the show the next day. That was really cool. That was like us pretending that we were a real news organization for a second.
Indecision, 2008.
Right.
It seems like this past year that there's been more turnover on the show. Maybe because of the strike. Is that my sense, or is that reality?
I don't think it's as much turnover. Like, we don't have as many people leaving, but we've had some new faces. I think you're referring to the correspondents, probably.
Yeah.
Yeah. They've been really trying to like mix it up more, and just bring in like a diversity of new faces. Like we've had Kristen Shaw on to do some kind of very quirky, strange, funny, quasi-feminist approach to a couple of issues. We just brought in a new reporter, correspondent, who's also a writer on the show, Wyatt Cenac, he's this young African-American guy. We had Larry Wilmore sort of reporting on some more specifically black topics, but Larry Wilmore is like an incredibly successful writer in Hollywood, so we only get him when we can. Wyatt we have on our staff, so he can kind of just jump in with everyone else. And then I'm trying to think who else we've had. Well, just I think the mix now is that we have a bunch of different people that we go to at different times, like basically when they're available and they don't have anything better to do. We'll get Demetri Martin when we can get him. We'll get John Hodgman when we can get him. We'll get Larry when we can get him, and Lewis. It's just sort of catch can. But I think the pool of talent that is sort of part of our orbit now is just greater now, and that's just very nice because we can do a lot more things that way.
All right, and which staff is funnier, the writing staff for the Daily Show or the writing staff for the Colbert Report?
Oh, come on, Bob. You're trying to trap me here. First, I have to say who's the only funny guy on staff, and then I have to say which show is better. You were really trying to get me fired. It's really different. I mean, they're just really apples and oranges show because, Colbert is just like, it's all a character and an attitude that resonates with our political discourse right now, the sort of pundit, they know it all pundit. And it's just a different type of humor, I think. And we did have a little crossover. We had a writer named Eric Drysdale who wrote for our show for many years and then went over to Colbert. If you watch the Colbert Report, he was the guy who was the stage manager with the big glasses named Bobby. A short guy. He would come on sometimes, and then eventually Stephen ate him, I think, and his own tribute to cannibalism, which I was on, which actually aired, I think, the week that my book came out, and like all the Colbert fans who have all these great websites like No Fact Zone and Colbert Nation were all like wondering if there's some kind of weird coincidence between that. Like, no, I turned the book in a year ago. I don't think so. So we had that crossover, and we have basically the same production company running both shows. We had the same executive producer overseeing them for a while. So they're definitely from the same DNA, but I mean, I just think they're so different that, I mean, the only thing is that I guess we have to like coordinate to make sure we're not covering the same story in the same way sometimes. That's basically a phone call in the morning. But other than that, they go off and they do their own thing, and I think there's room for all of that.
How were you affected by the strike? And how did you feel about the show picking up without the writers back at one point?
Well, I think the second question is a little dicey. I think it's a very hard dilemma for people in John and the executive's positions because you've got John supported the writers in our cause on air, but at the same time you've got a staff of 60 or 70 people who are out of work through no cause of their own. So it's a tough call, and like all the late night hosts had to take their own approach to it. And as you saw, they all had a different response to it. As far as me personally, it was a really interesting time because it was kind of like it was a little bit apocalyptic in the sense, in the good sense of the word, in that it kind of changed all the rules and it kind of just like all the old institutions and stuff were not in place. So for me, to sound completely crass, it was pretty good for networking. Yeah. You could sort of talk to anyone because we were all kind of in the same trench. You know what I mean? So, high-level show creators and stuff that I never would, be allowed to talk to necessarily unless I was working for them. You could shoot them an email and say, hey, what do you think if we tried this idea? And there was this real kind of freewheeling and improvisatory spirit. Now, I say that because for me, fortunately, my wife and I were blessed enough to not have any major debts or like a mortgage or have, to have some money saved up, so we were able to weather it financially. At the same time, it was very difficult on a lot of writers and especially a lot of crew people who did not have necessarily financial resources and, were basically out of work. A writer can always write, but, but some people, that was basically their job. So it took a toll on a lot of people, and we were frankly frustrated that, from our perspective, that it took the studios that long to sort of reach the deal that we kind of feel that we could have all probably reached much earlier.
Mm-hmm. Let me ask you one more show-related question. I want to talk to you about a few other things before we let you go here. It's been kind of interesting watching the show, the politics of the show, segue a bit. The Bush administration made for such easy targets this past 8 years. And is it a challenge getting geared up to, and I don't know how much of the political stuff you get involved with, but is it a challenge getting geared up to rap on the Democrats just as hard in an election year as you've been able to, hit on the Republicans the last few years?
That's a great question because, as you say, we've been basically spoiled by the the smorgasbord of riches that the Bush administration has served up. I mean, you couldn't have scripted that. Not even Aaron Sorkin could have. I don't think no one would have believed it. And it is harder. I mean, I think it's not hard on principle to attack Democrats. It sometimes is a little bit, if you're inclined that way politically yourself, there's a little bit of dispiriting quality. For example, the Eliot Spitzer thing was such a funny story, but it was just sad in one way because you felt like this was a guy who, until he, couldn't keep it in his pants, was basically like a good fighter for like the right causes. So like there's this very bittersweet quality to all the fun we have with that. And it's really interesting now as the election has shifted to the general election. We're finding fault with Obama, which I think, he deserves criticism for certain things as well. And when we try that on the show, sometimes the audience doesn't necessarily go along with that right away because we got a lot of, Obama supporters in the audience. And, it's a tough challenge because, I think we have to maintain our credibility as speaking the truth and calling people out on their excesses, no matter who they are. And maybe the way to look at it is that we're trying to hold the Democrats up to the ideals that they said that they would enforce if they came to power. So when they fall from that or when they make sellout compromises and things like that, we've got to be vigilant and hold the fire to their feet as well. But at the same time, honestly, Obama, this is not necessarily as political, but Obama is not as fun a character. Politically, I kind of like the guy, but comedically, Hillary Clinton was a better foil. Just because she's just this rich, almost Shakespearean character with this whole history, and she kind of loved the fight in a certain way that Obama just looks bored with all the BS and all the scrapping that goes on your way to the election. But he just kind of looks bored and rolls his eyes, and he's kind of very earnest and very straight-faced about all this, and it's not fun. McCain is kind of entertainingly crazy, I think, but also a war hero, so you kind of got to take it only as far as you can go. So honestly, for up to me, it would have been I think Hillary Giuliani would have been the comedic dream ticket, comedic dream election.
Well, I'll hope for your sake that Barack Obama's got a Spiro Agnew in his pocket somewhere.
Yeah, that's right. The Veep is the big hope here, I think. Maybe if he got Carrot Top or someone as his vice president, we'd be set.
Now, speaking of politics, and I don't know when, but I know that you worked on Dennis Miller Live at some point.
Right.
Was that before or after he traded teams?
Well, it was interestingly enough. It was actually during. I was there at the end of the early years of 2000, and he was sort of libertarian, I would say, beforehand, where he was kind of an equal opportunity critic. And then the 2000 election happened, and that was very polarizing. So he'd sort of been what they call a California Republican, like Schwarzenegger, like Dennis Miller. Even today, he supports gay marriage and is pro-choice, and is not conservative on social issues, but favors lower taxes and is hawkish on foreign policy. So he's sort of in that moderate camp. But then 2000 election was very polarizing. So Republicans and Democrats were suddenly having to choose sides in a more strong way, and that affected the way he was doing the show. And then I think after 9/11, a lot of people, you get really anxious all of a sudden about national security in a way you hadn't thought of, and he got very more hawkish, I think, in his foreign policy, which a lot of people did. And that was weird for his audience because they were sort of used to him kind of being just kind of all-purpose irreverent. And now I think, he got concerned about what he saw, some issues, and, his choice was to come down on one side of them. But, that was a sort of very divisive time, I think, in general. So, if you had to pick a side, that was the side I picked. But, so I was there during that sort of transition, and I kind of saw the different stages, and so that was kind of interesting. We were making a lot of Bush jokes, and then we were sort of making less and less of them.
Yeah, that would be the period of time, I think, when historians look back on Dennis Miller, they'll say, "Oh, you mean the career-killing time?"
Well, yeah, I mean, like that was a tough call. I mean, you have to sort of hand it to him for just sticking to what he believes, whether you agree with it or not, because obviously it was not the popular choice to go in that direction. But his shtick has always been he calls it like he sees it, and if that's the way he honestly feels, you can't really fake political comedy. It's got to come from what your real gut instinct is. If you try to fake it, it doesn't work.
Right. I think he just lost a lot of people when what he believed changed so dramatically, seemingly overnight. But I was just curious.
Yeah.
You've got people want to check out your personal website, www.robkutner, Kutner. You've got a couple of fun videos on there. You've got your Juno parody, Jewno.
Right.
Where did that come from? That was pretty fun.
That was I do this show in New York every year, like a live stage show for the Jewish holiday of Purim, and we always do a promotional video to kind of raise interest in that. And that was my wife, who's a comedy writer as well, and I just had this idea. That was when Juno was Juno was like the big hot movie, and I think right around the time she won the Oscar for screenplay, and it was literally like one of those things where like the pun presented itself first, and then you couldn't go back from that. And like suddenly, like once you had that idea of just like what if the family that she was raised in and that she was having this baby in, what if they all Jewish? And then as you see in the video, basically it just takes all the sort of like a lot of modern Jewish stereotypes and mannerisms and sensibilities and just translates them into her world. Like she's saying maybe I should just have the baby. Maybe I should have the baby and give it to people who want it and won't make it go to law school. So, it's just sort of like a little twist on that. It's really a catalog of stereotypes. If there's any anti-Semites out there listening, I know you have a lot in your audience.
Well, I love the line. It's the story about a girl who just wanted to shtup, but wound up with the whole Megillah. It was great. Plus, I got to point out, you've got J.K. Simmons in there, who was in the feature film.
Yes, he plays the father in both the actual Juno and our Juno, which was an amazing thing. And that actually is a good example of one of those sort of silver linings of the strike, because I was on the picket line with a very prominent writer who had cast J.K. Simmons in one of his shows in the past. And my wife, who's like this comic genius who just has these ideas that you would never have thought of, says, what if we could why don't you ask him? Like she played a whole Kevin Bacon game in her head. I figured out that he was connected to this guy that I knew. And she said, why don't you ask him for his email? So I emailed J.K. Simmons, and the most surprising thing is that he agreed to do it. I still don't know what was in it for him, but maybe he wanted to get on the whole viral video thing. Who knows?
Well, it was great. So finally, so you mentioned your wife, Cheryl Zone, right?
Yes.
She's also a writer, but so I got to ask, since I've been making trouble all along this interview, who's funnier?
Oh boy. You just want me to have to go on the lam, don't you? Just to prepare for the podcast.
I want you to live your work. Yes.
Next time you see me, I'm going to have a blonde wig and boobs and be in a different city.
I think I've already seen you.
You have seen me, that's true. So it's too late. The damage is done. Again, like it's just different. Like we collaborate on projects like this. We don't write professionally together thus far, but she has a very different outlook on things. She likes different shows than I do, different comedy. Like we both like Billy Wilder. We both like certain TV shows and movies, but she has a different like sort of sensibility comedically. And what we do a lot is we exchange notes. We always look over each other's ideas for stuff. So, a lot of people have the spouse who's either like hates everything or even worse is uncritically supportive of everything. Oh, that's wonderful, dear. That sort of thing. I have the advantage of having a peer who is a very tough critic, who will not let anything get past her if she doesn't think it's solid or funny. And I'd like to think that I provide at least, a fraction of that service as well. Mm-hmm. But the other bad thing about that is that, the way that spouses will always correct each other when they're telling a story.
Oh yeah. So
what we do is we'll actually rewrite each other's jokes in public. Someone of us makes a joke at the party and the other one does a punch up on the spot.
Oh, man.
Which is probably not fun for anyone who's listening.
I can listen. Believe it or not, I can relate to that. My wife's an editor who edited my.
Oh, even better.
And I won't even let her look over my shoulder when I'm writing anymore, because she will be literally. I'll write a sentence and they'll say, "Oh, that's not how to say that. You want to rephrase it like this." I'm like, "Go away!" My God.
She just carries a red pen around with her at all times.
Oh my God, yeah, it literally and figuratively. Well, listen, folks, you can order Rob Kuttner's book titled "Apocalypse How: Turn the End of Times into the Best of Times" at any bookstore or online at mrmedia.com or amazon.com. And you can also check out his two websites, Apocalypse How, that's solid, apocalypsehow.com.
Actually, it's apocalypsehowthebook.com with no punctuation.
What he said, folks.
Yes.
And then his personal site is www.robkuttner.com, and that is solid.
And that leads you to Apocalypse How's website as well, if you wish to go that way.
It's like the end of the world. It all leads back to it.
All kinds of paths, yes.
Well, hey, Rob, thank you so much for joining us on the show today. You were a great guest, and lots of luck with the book and the TV show.
Thanks so much, Bob. Happy surviving.
Thank you, you too. Bye-bye.
Take care.
And, of course, for dozens more celebrity and media newsmaker interviews, surf over to our main website, www.mrmedia.com. That's where you can listen to my earlier conversations with the stars, writers, and producers of Curb Your Enthusiasm, Army Wives, 24, The Big Bang Theory, Pearls Before Swine, Tell Me You Love Me, The Dark Knight, Will Eisner's The Spirit, and many more. And please think about writing an online review of Mr. Media, casting a vote for it, or marking Mr. Media as one of your favorites, whether you listen on Blog Talk Radio, Digital Journal, Blueberry, Zencast, Odeo, or iTunes. Finally, folks, thanks so much for taking time out of your day to listen to Mr. Media and support the show. I really appreciate it, and I hope we'll have you back again real soon.